Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. There's a lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard.
Goeienaand, good evening fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Now, just to put it on the record, this is pre-recorded because of load shedding. And before we get into tonight's live stream, you have to make a note of this. Tuesday night, that's tomorrow night, I'm speaking to Dr. Peter McCulloch, and we're going to be discussing the whole issue regarding transgender and the damage that's been done with puberty blockers and surgeries to people who are teenagers. It's quite disgusting. That's tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. And then Wednesday night, please break out your popcorn and watch, because at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, Patrick Fisher from Farmers Aid will be addressing the highly defamatory claims and allegations being made by some little troll hiding behind the name of Web of Deceit. And we will be exposing Web of Deceit on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. So, let's get on to tonight's live stream, which is Hans Combrink, and we're going to be concentrating on two very prominent people in South African politics. J.G. Stratum, who was first a member of Parliament in the late 1920s, and then, of course, little Faraya, FW de Klerk, who first got into politics for the National Party in 1972. So, without any further ado, let's cross to Hans Combrink. Here we go. Hi Hans, good to see you again.
Good morning, Scott. Hope you're doing fine. It's still winter here with us, quite cold. I've been in the bushveld for a couple of days where it was quite hot during the day, but at night time it's getting very, very extremely cold. It's almost like desert conditions, very hot during daytime and extremely cold during night time. But we are surviving. We're moving towards the end of the winter, although we expect it still to carry on until start of October.
Yeah, well, I've
changing a lot.
I remember the Highveld conditions and how cold they used to get. Now, Hans, we've had a few live streams, or a couple of live streams already, and we've been talking about the history of the Boers. And, you know, it is an incredible story of deceit and deception by so many people against free-loving people who just wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to be farmers, and they just were,
Exactly.
yeah, they were just walked all over by the British and by Queen Victoria. But we're now going to be going to a particular aspect of South African history, which I think a lot of people do not understand. And it's the roles of, I guess you could say, it's more two people, but it's actually the families as well associated with those two people. And we're talking about first Strydom,
Yes.
who came to Parliament in 1929. Now, Strydom was to be a very influential politician when it came to um, FW de Klerk getting involved
Yes.
in politics. So I think we need to understand a bit of Stradom's background. Do you want to tell us a bit about Stradom, who was called the Man of Honor?
The man of honor and the Lion of the North. He was a fighter. He was a fierce fighter for what he believed in. And he was actually a bit suppressed by the media because they really didn't want this man to make his mark, to tell you the honest truth. I want to tell you that, well, I want to highlight that Strydom and de Klerk related with family ties because Strydom was married to FW's aunt. They can be considered as the two poles in our history, in politics history. Prominent figures, two different poles. Such that Strydom could be considered as the only pure Boer leader, as from the time of the Union of South Africa, which was actually like created by the British, controlled by the British. And as from Louis Botha, the first Prime Minister of the Union, up to the last Prime Minister belonging to the NP National Party, that was FW de Klerk. Strydom was the only one with pure Boer principles. That I can prove. It's not difficult to do that. There were a couple of hybrids, like I will call Herzog, General Herzog. He was a hybrid, and I will explain that later.
Right.
And also Malan was a hybrid, and also Verwoerd. And Strydom was the only Boer, and the rest of them were all Afrikaners.
Okay.
So just to highlight that, to point that out, so then we would understand all the rest much better. Starting with Strydom, I would just like to do some recap. We mentioned, like you mentioned before in your introduction, today in your introduction as well, that the Boers were always like the underdogs,
Yeah.
oppressed,
Yeah.
and put undercover by the Afrikaners. Always an effort not to let their light shine. And I just want to go back and before we start with Strydom, just to highlight some remarks by prominent British leaders during and after the Boer War, and even before that. Governor Benjamin de Urban's commentary on the Voortrekkers was a brave, patient, and orderly and religious nation, the explorers, defenders, and taxpayers of the land. So he respected them. He described the reason behind them to track as follows: uncertainty about body and property, insufficient return of their losses of slaves, and despair of ever receiving compensation for losses caused by attacks and robbery by the causers. Winston Churchill mentioned in his book, The Purple and the Gold, the Boers were the most humane people, the most good-hearted enemy I have ever fought against in 4 continents. And the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald said, the Boer nation is a noble nation. They have been overwhelmed but not conquered. And there was an English soldier, his name was Hales, is the surname, I'm not sure what his name was. During the Anglo-Boer War, he was wounded and he lost his conscience. And when he got by, he made this remark. And there I should like to say a word to the people of England. Our men, when wounded, treated by the Boers, were mainly gentleness and kind consideration. On the road we called at many farms, and every one man, woman, and children came out to see us. Not one taunting word was uttered our hearing. Not one braggart sentence passed their lips. Let no man or woman in all of the British Empire whose son or husband lies wounded in the hands of a Boers fears for his welfare. For it is a sole foul slander to say that Boers do not treat their wounded well. The Boers have most excellent provision for the treatment of wounded after battle. All that science can do is done. The medical men fight as hard to save British life or limb of a private person. At the Bloemfontein Hospital, everything is as near as perfection from a medical and surgical point as any sane man can hope to see. Concerning our matron and nurses, all I can say is that they are gentlemen and the highest type of which any nation in the world might be and should be proud of.
Right.
Just a few remarks. I don't want to expand too much about that. Just to highlight the real character of a Boer, and I think it's quite clear from these remarks what they really fought of their enemy, even if it was their enemy.
Right.
So then I would like to attach that, like I said, Strydom was really the only real Boer. Sorry for this coming through on my computer. He was really the only true Boer, according to Boer principles,
right,
as a leader of his country. So I will look at the background. We will discuss the background.
So, sorry, can I just clarify? So you're saying that people like Jan Smuts, P.W. Botha, they were not really reflective of the Boer nation. They were more reflective of the Afrikaner. And that's a huge difference between the two groups.
Very much. I can just mention here that although Strydom and P.W. Botha were like house friends, their families visited each other.
Yeah.
And they dined together and all of that. But Strydom was a man of principle, a man of honor. He never appointed that friend of him. He refused. Because he knew that P.W. Botha was actually a left winger.
Right. And
he was undermining with his, they called him the liberals of Kerom Street. It's a short street at Parliament where they dined during lunchtime. All the liberal guys, they called him the liberals of Kerom Street, and he was part of that. And he was also the guy eventually who crossed the Rubicon, if you can remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Piet Sillier, I mean, we're going back a little bit earlier here. We're going back to 1910. What was his role when it came to J.G. Strydom?
Well, he was undermining like guys like P.W. Botha. He was an extreme atheist left winger, and the general perception of politics, as we all know, is normally much influenced by the media.
Absolutely.
The media's got control over what's happening. It's almost like history is written by the enemy.
Yeah.
Sometimes and the conqueror. So the media is normally in total control of what's happening, what's going on, and dictating and influencing people's mind. I can just give an example of Hitler, for instance. One of the reasons why he was so successful in picking Germany up, because there was not even one newspaper writing against him. I'm not sure if you're aware of it.
Oh yeah.
They were all on his side.
Yeah.
They were all on his side, and that's what we call propaganda.
Well, we've got
propaganda.
We've got that happening today. In Australia, they've just bringing into law a misinformation bill, and the irony is that politicians at a state and federal level can openly tell porky pies or tell lies, and that's okay. But if one of the citizens tells a porky pie or a lie publicly, they can be in a whole lot of trouble. You know, this is we're living in basically dictatorial times, just like what you're talking about here.
Exactly. Shakespeare said, "All the world's a stage.
Yeah.
And everyone has to play a part in it." And he said, "This mine is a sad one." And this role, which these media companies play, are actually a sad one, because they're playing right in the hands, and they driving the agenda of the New World Order.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know about Agenda 21.
Oh, absolutely. But look, we'll get to that separately, because I just want to go historically through the times. So
these we call diabolic forces, and at this stage in time, and for a long time actually, for many decades, they've been driving the New World Order agenda. Like I mentioned, Agenda 21, and to the likes of persons of George Soros, Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Carnegies, and Bilderbergers to the main ones.
Yeah.
And in the past, like Shakespeare said, everyone has to play a part in this. All the world's a stage, and everyone has to play a part. And there were certain people playing these roles and playing these parts in the past, which led to the situation where we are in today. And we need to understand what happened. We need to know who is who played which role, and this is why it's very important to highlight certain people, and also the consequences of their agendas which they were driving. And the general perception is mostly formed by the mainstream media. Like we said, they've got control over information and how to form the opinions of people. Now, since the Afrikaner government started in 1910, the country has always been under the control of the Broederbondes, and also, like I mentioned, Piet Sillier was very extreme leftist Afrikaner. Well, he was the CEO, actually, the chairman of Naspers, which is as well, like I mentioned, the example before with the Broederbond being actually formed, and it was actually a takeover of an organization started to promote the interest of the Boers in 1918, Young South Africa, eventually turned into a Broederbond because the Afrikaners infiltrated and turned this organization into an organization driving their agendas. And the same was happening with Naspers. It started off with Voortrekker Pers, which Strydom was also the chairman. It turned to Straight Pers, and eventually it turned into a left-supporting media company. News 24 is the most prominent channel at this stage in time. So it's the same pattern we recognize over and over. And the lack of a Boer, the problem is the Boer doesn't even realize all of this. And even more, if they realize it, they don't know what to do about it. And the forces, the world forces, were always behind this leftist guys and these organizations and companies.
So I take it that Piet Sillier, as the editor of one or more Afrikaans newspapers, was actually undermining J.G. Strydom politically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for sure. In those days, he passed away long ago, but that was, during the most critical times in our country, we still have the power to stop this.
Right.
But the people were brainwashed by these mainstream media companies.
Right.
And they were sleeping. They didn't realize what's going on. Now this is a classic example, a very good example of a frog in the pan, where I call it boiling in the water, like Ramaphosa mentioned.
Oh yes, okay.
Will boil like frogs. So they never realize, because the temperatures have been rising very slowly, and the moment they realize we are not surviving, something is wrong, they actually they can't get up.
Yeah.
They tranquilize.
Yeah.
They can't get out of a pot. It's too late. That's more or less where we are sitting today.
Yeah.
People realizing now, with the coming of the social media, that they get information now, and now we're actually very frightened and stressed.
And that's why they're bringing in. That's why they're censoring people.
Yeah, they're shocked to realize this, but they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Let's just stick to J.G. Strydom. So okay, so he came into politics in 1929, and he was directly associated with the de Klerks. Do you want to just take us through how that family? You mentioned the auntie, etc. But do you want to?
Long after he entered Parliament, he was one of the guys who stood up during the rebellion. He refused to just mentioning what signs were there in his life to show it in what direction he was going and what his ideologies were. During the 1914 rebellion, he refused to take part into exercise and all that drilling. What do you call it? Marching and all that drilling they've been doing in military times, and drills they've been doing. He refused to take part in that, so that was a sign that he was not with this Afrikaner government. He also refused to submit official requests for licenses and all that in English. He said, "I will write this in Afrikaans." Those were the first signs.
Yeah.
Although he was, and people always like to put out a skew opinion of this guy, and because he was in military service in 1914, they said, yeah, he was actually hunting the rebels, and that's not true. So we need to go deeper than just what is portrayed by the media. This is very, very, very important. That's why I will mention a book written by Piet Meyering. I send you the front page of his book to be shared.
All right. Well, look, I'll just put that up on the screen right now so people can see it. And yeah, keep on talking.
Yeah, going deeper into facts, reading books, not just believing what is said in the media, and propaganda can also be positive, but this is like negative, false propaganda being spread about these people and trying to brainwash people and give the wrong impression of that eventually leads to a wrong perception of people. So Strydom was known as from the start as a guy with right-wing principles, and eventually he would be well known for his very expressive ideas of white supremacy. He was not afraid to tell the world that he believes in white supremacy. I've got a letter written in 1958, the year he passed away, just after his passing. This letter was actually posted in the Transvaler of the day, the Afrikaans morning paper, Transvaler, in which he expressed condolences to Strydom's wife, which was the aunt of FW de Klerk. Her name was Susanna de Klerk. I'm not sure if you're aware about that. He was married to Susanna de Klerk. And in this article, or this letter, which was in the newspaper, this certain prominent black businessman, Mr. Motlase, he expressed normal condolences about passing of a person and Susanna's husband, and then he said three prominent things. He said Strydom was considered as our father. Strydom was considered the one, and I've got a cutting of it. I still have it, from the original paper. People, when I tell people about this, they say you're lying. You made it up. I said, I've got the cutting. It's yellow paper. It's been faded. You can see the age of it. It's really coming from 1958. And he said he was our father and the one who saved us. And then he said he really looked after the welfare of his black children. And he was giving the way, he was leading the way for us to develop next to the more experienced white people to govern this country, and we would follow because we can trust them. And so Strydom believed in white supremacy, but he had the backup of the black people in those days. But nowadays he's called a tyrant, one of the fathers of apartheid and a tyrant. It's a very skewed image of him because the people who lived during his times, that is what they thought about and what they said about him. So it's just a good example of how information is actually distorted and how people are influenced in a negative way because they have been receiving lies all the time, mainly from the media.
Right. Now look, there's one prime minister who confuses me. And that is Verwoerd. I'll tell you why, because Verwoerd to me was basically a right-wing sort of fellow. You know, he believed in nationalist. You had his big thing was the homelands, and you know he was hammered for that. But you're saying to me that Verwoerd was actually more like an Afrikaner, more on the left leaning of politics, which doesn't seem to fit with what he did with apartheid.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And again, we can recognize this role of a media to present a very skewed and distorted picture of the real truth.
Right.
Doing investigation. Let's start with Verwoerd. He was born in Holland, so he was not born in a South African. And that his mother came from Friesland. I'm not sure if, how it's pronounced in English. In Holland, it's a province of Holland.
Yeah.
Where all these, most of the stubborn Boerish type, because the term Boer actually came from Holland, from Belgium and Holland.
Right.
So let's call them Boers already. They call them, well, it was spelled Boors, Boers.
Yeah.
And most of our stubborn Boerish ideas and principles originated from those people coming from Friesland. And his mother was from there. So definitely that ideology was embedded in him. But we have to remember he was never a real Boer. And he never promoted any Boer principles and goals. There's no proof of it. I read a lot of his speeches. Unlike Strydom, who always spoke about Boers, because Strydom actually promoted the restoring of original Boer republics like Natalia, ZAR, and the Free State. He was promoting that, and he also wrote a book about it. I just can't find any copy of it. I was just told that somebody read a book, having that principle in goal. And this specific person, this I want to show you. And that was one of the weaknesses of Strydom. I don't know why he married into this de Klerk family. Did he not realize? I don't know. We can't say. There are a lot of gray areas which we might never clear up. And one of this specific person, he called son Strydom, so son of Strydom, which was still alive, and he was inquiring about this book. And what he said was the most foul language he could never expect from that woman. She swore at him. She didn't want to be involved with anything related to Boers, but we will get to that. That's the de Klerk mentality.
Yeah.
So, Verwoerd had a South African idea. He was actually riding on the back of Malan and Strydom. But also, Malan was also like a hybrid, according to me. He was a Freemason. I'm not sure if you're aware about that.
Oh, yes.
Verwoerd was a Broeder, not a Freemason. And I've always been sharing this idea, and on social media and on these social platforms, getting debates and arguments about the previous leaders of our country. I always said that Strydom was no Broederbonder. But I couldn't prove it. I had no proof to back myself on that. People say, no, he was for sure. I said, no, I can't prove it, but one day I will be able to prove it. And I read this book of Lindy Koorts. She's a professor, I think, at Free State University in history. And she wrote a book on Malan. It's a very thick book. I just scanned. I couldn't get the time to read through the whole book. And I still have a book, but I will do that for sure, because there's a lot of good facts in there.
Yeah.
And there she mentioned that Strydom did not believe in any secret organization. She criticized him a lot. She didn't like him. She said, how can this guy, he was uncompromising. He never wanted to make compromises with his enemies. She said, how can he be a leader like that? But that was his strong point, and he proved that it was the right thing to do. But she said he was the only one of all of them who never was a Broederbonder. And a person who was in national intelligence previously, a couple of years ago, well, during the old regime, actually. And he told me also that part of their task was to investigate all the ideologies of the leaders, to go deep into their beliefs and all of that. And he said Strydom was the only one who was not influenced by the Freemasons.
Okay.
So this is the fact of interest. Like, that could not be said about Verwoerd.
Now, just on that point, what I found very disturbing is that even Nelson Mandela I've seen photos of him with the Knights of Malta outfit.
No, of course, yeah.
You know,
Order of Malta. That is the main Scottish center of Freemasonry. And
yeah.
the Queen was the head. Elizabeth was the head of Order of Malta. No, of course, he was through and through. I mean, he was totally part of a New World Order agenda.
So it seems that people who rose to the top in politics in South Africa following Stratham all appear to be involved in some way with the Freemasons, and you know that they
Broederbond is being a member of a Broederbond is just a step prior to getting a Freemason. So it's all in line, the same. All these round table and all these things.
Right.
I'm not sure, I can't think of all of them now, but the round table is one of them.
Oh.
And the Reiterwag as well.
Okay,
of the organizations which Afrikaners belong to as a step towards being broeders and then Freemasons.
Yeah, I just want to keep moving forward historically. Okay, we're talking about Verwoerd. Now, it was about that time that the Oppenheimer and Rupert family suddenly became very, very visible in not just the media, but obviously with their wealth. Apparently Verwoerd was quite supportive of these ultra-rich families.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so what was Verwoerd's view? What was Verwoerd's views on Rupert and Oppenheimer?
No, I'm not sure about the Ruperts, but he was definitely not liked by the Oppenheimers because Harry Oppenheimer made a lot of speeches. You know, Harry Oppenheimer's father was Sir Ernest Oppenheimer, so it was actually a family legacy, and they were all very much opposing the apartheid regime, definitely. But the biggest thing is always about money and manipulating and smoke screens, like driving the human rights agenda. But then they support people who've got no proper respect for human life. The most basic human life is not respected. Well, ironically, it was always about money.
I'm going to tell you a story which supports exactly what you're saying. Back in the very early 1980s, about 1980, 1981, I bought a farm in the Drakensberg at Champagne Castle. And I used to go up there. I worked at the bank in Ecopa, Barclays Bank in Ecopa. Yeah. And I used to go up there on weekends. And this one Sunday, it was about midday, there was this old Lesotho walking just on the other side of my fence. I had a 50-acre tract of land there. And
he had a blanket over his shoulders.
He had the whole 9 yards, yeah. And then
I know, I've been there.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what happened. He waved at me and said hi, and I waved back, and I said, "Come on in and let's have a chat." So he came in, and we sat down. I'll never forget this. We sat down, and I had this little forest in the one corner of the property, and there were like logs that you could sit on, and we were sitting on these logs just talking. And I said to him, "Look, tell me a bit about your life." And he said, because he was an old guy, he must have been well into his, about my age, late 60s, I guess, at that time. And you could see that he was battling. He couldn't walk properly. And he said, well, I actually worked from being a young man or being a sort of like a 18-year-old at the mines for De Beers underground. Yeah. And he worked for them for about over 40 years. And he was in a rock fall at one of the mines. Yeah. And he hurt his back and he couldn't work anymore. And he was unceremoniously given his marching orders by De Beers, and without any pension, without anything. And because his salary was going back to feed his family back in Lesotho, when he lost his job, the family just told him to piss off because he couldn't support them anymore. But
Yeah.
that's the real nature of this so-called human rights advocate. We're talking about the
Exactly.
Oppenheimers.
Thank you for
They,
that. Thank you for
yeah,
that.
they didn't give one. They didn't
Yeah.
care at all about people. But this guy actually then became my induna on my farm because I was having a problem with Africans from nearby putting sheep onto my property. So he would actually
Property, yeah.
sort of look after the farm for me. And he had a little kraal there, and I would pay him so much, and I brought him mealie meal, and it was a symbiotic relationship that we had, and
Yeah.
he was a
Yeah.
lovely guy, but he was just turfed out of De Beers because he could no longer be used.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I also found one or two guys like that when I went up the Sani Pass to Sani Top Lodge. And I went inland a bit, and I met these Lesotho people, and I found the guy who was very shy to speak to me. And then he started talking Fanagolo. I said, "Oh, you worked in the mines," and then we had a connection. And he was also living in poverty, actually,
Yeah,
up in the mountains. I know exactly what you're talking about. So it's another classic example of don't practice what you preach. They use
blatant hypocrisy. Blatant hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Accusing the wrong people of what they're actually doing is just projecting it onto the
Yeah.
Boers all the time. When you go back into the history of the Boers, actually they had very good relations with their black people on the farms.
Yeah.
And during the Boer War, these black people stay loyal to these farmers.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were looking after their children, and they
Yeah.
were attempting sometimes and protecting them and hiding them from the British, chasing them
Yeah.
like animals, to put the women and children, especially, to place them into the concentration camp. So that goes right through from the start, when we discussed the role of the missionaries. You still remember the London Missionary Society? They always wanted to project their misdemeanors onto the Boers.
Yeah.
And it's still happening today. It's still happening today.
Now, let's just get back to Stratum, because this guy was very little. People don't really understand the role of Stratum in South African politics.
Not at all. Not
So
at all.
Stratum was the one who brought the de Klerk family into politics, wasn't he?
Yes. Let me go back there. It's very interesting,
Yeah.
actually, and it's a bit of dirty washing, maybe, but it's important to note and to reveal this to people who don't know what really happened. Like some people might say, or want to say, that it was the de Klerks who brought Stratum into politics. That's impossible, because Stratum was in Parliament way long back before they were even on the scene. People know
Yeah.
about it. Now it started with FW's father Jan. Because Stratum was married to Jan's sister, Susanna de Klerk. Now, Jan de Klerk was a school principal in Germiston, where he was caught peeping onto the school girls in the hostels. In the hostel. So he was a joke of the day.
Yeah.
In those days, it was still a shame to do things like that. Today, you would be very famous for doing that. I think you will get a position in Parliament, because the Parliament is full of criminals.
Yeah.
And in those days, it was still a bad thing. And like I say, a shame. It was a joke of a day. And he had ambitions to get into politics. But for that reason, because everybody knew, some even called him a pedophile. I can't back that. Sometimes people just add some tales to the story. But what is definitely true, he was a peeper. He peeped the girls in the hostel, in the school hostel. So he could never get into politics. And he had ambitions. He really wanted to. So his opportunity came when his brother-in-law became prime minister. And Stratum was accused of giving Baiti to Boetie. There were two things which I would criticize Stratum on. Appointing his brother-in-law as a minister, although, fortunately for Stratum, Jan de Klerk turned out to be a very, very good minister. He was good at his job. He even relieved John Foster when John Foster got ill in the late 70s as the state president. He had this, what do you call it, albatross around his neck. And he got his opportunity to get into politics, and that paved the way for his son FW, and this actually led to the disaster.
But didn't
It was
Jan de
better.
Klerk become Prime Minister as well in 54?
No, never. No. He was just relieving John Foster. Because
Ah,
in those days, the role of a state president and prime minister was so separate. It's only living a few years into PW's time that
right.
it became one. He was the first one having both duties, PW. In those days, it was just relieving. He was never a prime minister.
Yeah.
But that paved the way for his son, and directly led to what we are in today. This tragic condition that country is in and the people are in today. So, and there are two things which I could criticize straight on. It was appointing his brother-in-law, and I can't say why. We don't know what he knew about him, what his opinion was. Maybe there was no social media in those days. I think the information was limited, and also an insight into who you're marrying into. Straton was very sharp on that. Like I mentioned, he never wanted to appoint PW, Botha, because he knew what his real beliefs were. So that's a grey area for me. I don't know. And it was actually a blunder. To me, it was the biggest blunder. Although I'm really respecting Straton as the only pure Prime Minister, the Lion of the North, man of honor, like Piet Meyering said. But very ironically, I think he made the biggest mistake of them all. And I don't think it was, he was really aware of the consequences it would have. But that's life. Life is sometimes very mysterious and we don't understand things. And the second thing I criticize him on is by making the 1928 Union flag, as it is called, the one which we may not expose today.
Well, I've got it hanging on my wall. I've got it hanging on my wall here.
Yeah, I don't respect that flag, not for the reason of the liberals, but
Yeah.
from a right-wing perspective. Like I consider Verwoerd being left, and people think I'm crazy because he's the icon of apartheid. And actually, if you go too deep into the facts, he was not. So it's misconceptions. And that flag, I mean, it's way better. It's 1,000 times better than this current flag.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what we should realize, it's like looking at a two-dimensional picture. If you look at it long enough, you see the 3D part of it, without even the 3D glasses. It's possible. So looking at these things, eventually, long enough, it actually becomes clear what is really going on. And the problem with that flag is that little British pinnacle, the spider there.
Yeah.
And can I explain to you?
Well, there are two flags that are missing on there, and the British one shouldn't be there.
Yeah, exactly. You've got it right. And nobody even realizes it. There should have been 4 flags because there were 4 provinces. So the flag of the Vierkleur of the ZAR is there. The Free State flag is there. Where were the flags of Natal and the Cape?
Yeah, exactly.
Why? Nobody ever asked that question. Nobody ever thought about it. And that little British flag is the Spinnacle flaggie is hanging close to the pole.
Yeah.
Remember what you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Because why? The people of Natal and the people of the Cape are still associated with Mother England. And they still considered Mother England as the authority. That's why they even sacrificed. And they had their own flags. I went into it. They had their own flags, of course. But they surrendered that. They said, no, we still prefer Mother England. And so Mother England always had the foot in the door still. That's from after the control they had with the kindergarten government after this post the Anglo-Boer War. And as from 1910, they were still in control, actually, manipulating with the Union. And even the Republic of Verwoerd, the 1961 Republic, this was a total wrong republic. It was a South African republic. And Straton strived towards the reinstating of a Boer republic. And Verwoerd had no sentiment to that, not at all. And Straton also, he was also driving, putting his force and his thoughts about a South African republic. But people confronted him on that. They said, but this is not the correct republic coming, and there's a wrong flag as well. And eventually we realized that. But Straton, he got aggressive when they accused him of that, because he knew that this guy confronting him was correct. We were not supposed to drive the South African Republic because it will lead. They had the foresight to see and to understand and to grasp the fact that it would lead to where we are today, and they were totally right. Strydom realized they were right, but he knew he wouldn't live long because his health wasn't good. And he was so much longing for a republic that he lost a bit of focus. The 61 Republic was totally wrong. It was a South African Republic, and Verwoerd had South African ideas, not Boer ideas, because he was never a Boer by heart.
Right. Now, just joining some dots here. So what we've got is Strydom being the married to the aunt of FW de Klerk. Yes. And through that relationship with the de Klerk family, Jan de Klerk landed up getting into politics and becoming a minister. And that opened the door for FW de Klerk to get into politics with the National Party. How did that come about?
I'm not sure because Jan de Klerk on his turn would be opening doors for FW, I'm sure.
Yeah,
because like
absolutely.
Son, he was following in his father's footsteps.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything in my research on history on how exactly that happened, but we can just imagine.
But when did FW de Klerk first become a member of Parliament?
I'm not quite sure about that. I haven't traced that.
So would it be in about the 1960s?
It must have been, yes.
Okay.
It must have been, I'm sure. Looking at taking into account his age. And he also had a very similar liberal brother by the name of Wimpy, or Willem de Klerk. I'm not sure if you're aware of him.
No.
He was also the editor of Rapport. So he was very similar to a pizza here. I
can't
say he was an atheist, like earlier, but he was very left-wing. And he invented the word verkramp. You must remember that word. When the HNP split from the NP in 1969, they were called verkramptes. Yeah. And that word was actually invented by Wimpy de Klerk. He was an editor. He was a prominent guy at Potch University, also like FW. They were all involved at Potch University. And he was an extremely liberal guy. He's also involved with the Voortrekkers, the youth movement. Voortrekkers, you should know that. You see, all the boorish things are always, at the end of the day, dominated by them.
Yeah.
That is the agenda, and that was the methodology. And the problem with the Boers is they never realize that. They never get to understand this. That's why they keep on battling. They keep on being the underdogs with no proper and significant influence because they don't see the picture. They don't realize what was going on and what is still going on.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a legacy. A legacy. There's a Strydom legacy. What were the consequences of his policies, white supremacy? It's outcome based. Just look at what happened to South Africa after the reign of Strydom and then Verwoerd. The country, the National Party's dominance increased. The voting counts increased dramatically after Strydom because he was very much loved by the people. If it's possible, Scott, can you maybe share the pictures I sent to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Let me share them with you as well. Hang on. So I'll just start off with this photo here, and I'm going to share it with you so you can talk about the photos. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to get them up. Okay, and share. Yeah, so give us a background on these photos. Here we are. Okay, tell me when you see it.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for him. Still don't see that's coming up now. Okay, look at this man. Every picture tells a story. He's triumphant. He's a leader. He's got confidence.
Yeah.
He's got a smile on his face. I don't know if you agree with me.
Absolutely.
This is a picture of a man who is winning. He's a victor. He's a lion of the north.
Yeah.
He fights his battles. He fights for his people, and the people loved him.
This is J.G. Stratham.
That's J.G. Stratham.
Yeah.
Even at his funeral, blacks were sitting on the sidewalks, weeping, crying, because he was always amongst his people. He was actually called not a politician by the British press. They said, but this man is no politician. They were quite right. He was a leader.
Yeah.
He was no politician. And that's the difference. There's another picture. You can share that one.
Sure. I'll do the next one.
Look at that guy. This is the way he interacted with his people. He was a very honest man in all his, even Steve Hofmeyr. You know, I still consider Steve Hofmeyr as a liberal, although he's making right-wing noises.
Yeah.
Because of what happened in the country. And he mentioned the other day, he called Stratham president. It's not really a president, but prime minister. It's not much difference. He used his own stamps on his letters. He never used his private letters. He never used the government stamps, which was provided by him. His children and his family were prohibited to use the government stamps on their private letters. His children were not allowed to be taken to school by government vehicles. When he got to Newlands, he was a sports lover as well. He was also a good rugby player.
Yeah.
So when he got to Newlands for a rugby game, and he noticed the ministers were there with their government cars, he got furious. So he was really a man of honor. And this is also his biggest critics today point that out, that he was a man who leaded by example. But that is what we want. That is what we need. That's what we don't realize. I always give as good example. If you take a little polystyrene glass, it's easy to make a hole on the side. And you take a sharp pencil or pen or something, and you make a hole on the side, say 2 centimeters from the bottom. Up to which level would you be able to fill that glass, that polystyrene cup?
Only 2 centimeters.
Yeah, I would be able all these, exactly. So where your leader is, that's where your standards will be.
Right, and that's why South Africa's in such a mess today.
Exactly. So
I mean, can I just put it this way? When it comes to a moral compass, the hole you're talking about would be at the bottom of the polystyrene cup.
Maybe even below.
Is it possible? Now, just getting back to FW de Klerk, I've just been doing a bit of research while we're talking. He actually became a member of Parliament in 1972 for Vereniging. Yeah, so it was early 1970s in Vereniging.
I knew that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure about the date.
Yeah.
So even it's very late. It's very late. I mean, compared to Stratham's time since 29.
Sure. Yeah.
And his father in 54.
Yeah.
Because his father became a minister. He was never even part of the Senate in those days.
Yeah.
He was totally out of politics. It was Stratham who brought him into politics in 1954 by appointing him as a minister. I can't really remember the portfolio, but he was appointed as a senior minister.
And just for people who don't know what FW de Klerk looks like, he's actually on the image for this live stream, but there's a photo of him. That must have been just before his death.
A couple of years before his death.
Yeah, because
he's just after he left the combined ANC NP government.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, I don't want to get personal, but this is the face of a loser.
Yeah. Well, look,
you can agree with me on that.
He's certainly, a lot of people see him as a pariah or a traitor.
He's a pariah. Actually, he's not a pariah. You know why? I always say that they call Afrikaners pariahs. I say, no, we are not pariahs.
Yeah.
We are not traitors. We're actually loyal to their goal. That's to be the enemy of a Boer. So we're actually not pariahs. You can only call a person a traitor or pariah when he's supposed to be in your midst and he betrays you.
Yeah.
But these guys are not our brothers. They're not part of our nation. They are the enemy.
No.
So you can't call the enemy a pariah when he is against you, when he opposes you. If you understand what I mean.
Sure. Now we've talked
I understand
about
what you mean in people, but they're actually not pariahs. They're actually very loyal people but loyal to their own agenda.
Yeah.
And to their own demonic plans. Because, like I say, outcome-based. Look at South Africa after Malan Verwoerd and Strydom. It was by far the best developed economy.
Absolutely.
Provided with a rand even stronger than the dollar.
I think the dollar, I think
rand.
50 cents in South African currency would buy you a US dollar in the 1960s.
Yeah, but okay, later on, but as a consequence of these guys' policies and training and ideologies, the rand became like 3.5 to the dollar. That was I investigated into that, and that was the strongest the rand ever was against the dollar.
Now look,
we almost 19, we are 18 to 19. just look at the turnaround.
It's crazy. Yes. Now look, I want to turn our focus on FW de Klerk because people need to understand that this guy is a very controversial person, and most South Africans today despise him because of what he did. And when PW Botha was basically kicked out of his position and de Klerk came in, he just turned everything around, didn't he?
Of course, because PW, it's not that PW didn't have the same aim eventually, but he just, for some reason, he was slowing down the process. And FW, because I'm not sure if you are aware that there was a project Hammer.
Yes.
FW involved, and he received at least 50 million. There's different amounts mentioned, but he received at least 50 million to give away his country, like a Judas fee.
Well, he got the Nobel Peace Prize with Mandela, which was another bit of coercion. Yeah.
You get the Peace Prize, but you actually initiated and promoted
the destruction of South Africa,
in a country which is not peace at all, and which led to today. You get more than 15 people killed per day, more than 150 raped per day. The infrastructure is a mess.
Can I just correct you on the killings per day, because it's over 70 people per day who die in South Africa, which is actually more civilians that get killed in Ukraine, which is a war zone per day. So South Africa is a war zone.
Exactly, and the rapes, I think, is more than 160 a day. And everything that should be down is up, and everything which should be up, all the indicators which should be up is down.
And sorry, I just want to also reflect on the fact that very few rapes actually get reported to the police because people know they're wasting their time. So those 160 you talk about are those that have been actually reported and the police have put a docket out. So the actual number of rapes in South Africa is probably closer to about 1,000 per day.
And the unemployment as well. They talk about 50%, but it's close to 50%.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I just want to focus on FW de Klerk now, Hans. Okay, so we know he came into politics in 1972 in Vereniging, and he was basically pushed by a couple of the heavyweight politicians in the National Party. Do you want to take us through his rise to ousting PW Botha? How did that all come about?
Well, I think he was earmarked from the start due to his leftist ideologies. He was the right man.
Does this involve the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts? Were they pushing for him?
No, I've got pictures with George Soros.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I've got a picture I can send you in his presence of George Soros. So he's like Mandela, same. Bill Gates as well. Wow. So it's clear. There's no doubt about it. That
he was in those circles.
Of course, That's definitely no doubt about it. That's the truth. It's well known. That's general knowledge actually, and also his link, his Greek connection. You know, the Greek wife.
Yes.
After his wife Mariki was killed.
Yeah.
And it's very controversial, that murder as well, because rumors have it that she was writing a book.
Yeah.
his whereabouts, and what he was doing and his conduct. And she was silenced.
Yeah. Well,
And this operation Hammer, which he received, well, we will never know a real amount. 50 million is like small pocket money for these guys, but at least 50 to 70 to 100 million.
it's rather like CR17, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Ramaphosa's little booty. What is it? It was about 100 million rand he got or something. Or was it a billion rand? I think it was a billion rand.
No, millions. No, it's millions. It's actually ironic, but it's a relatively small amount to sell your country for.
Yeah.
To sell your soul. And apparently also PW Botha got aware of this. You know, somebody told him about this. It filtered through to him, and he was like he also claimed that he was poisoned in his last days. You remember he had the stroke.
Yeah.
And he was lying sick in his house in Wilderness. And when he heard about this, he came under his attention. He ordered, like, no, he not really what he ordered, but he insisted that FW come and visit him at his house. He confronted him about this. So this is not just thumbsuck stories.
Yeah. Well, look, I spoke to a guy, it must have been 2 years ago. I've forgotten what his name is now, but he actually met PW Botha, because PW Botha's house backed onto a river. I think it was a river. I don't think it was a sea. I think it was a river. Might have been the sea.
Yeah.
But he was fishing.
Yeah, it couldn't be the sea because George is a couple of kilometers from the beach, from the seaside, so it must have been the river.
Yeah, but this guy was fishing, and all of a sudden he heard a voice behind him, and it was PW Botha. And he couldn't believe it. He hadn't realized he was outside the house of P.W. Botha. And they got talking, and P.W. Botha invited him into his house. And they had a cup of tea, and they had a chat and stuff like that. And, you know, he was so impressed by P.W. Botha. And there's this classic clip of P.W. Botha where he's describing what would happen to South Africa under a black government. I think it was done outside his house.
No, true. Mate, there's a lot of video clips, going around as well, where he warned about it. But he was a two-hearted person because he was driving this. He was actually opposing the government, conservative government of Malan Wood. Like I told you, he was one of the liberals of Kirom Street.
Yeah.
But if you read his history and his biography, he's been a single child. He's been very spoiled. It's always his way. He was very selfish. And he stepped on people to get very, very, very got eventually. He was not a good character in all.
That's P.W. Botha.
That's P.W. Botha. My mother knew him. He was an organizer. My grandfather, the father of my mother, he was married to Stradom's sister.
Oh, wow.
So Stradom is my great uncle. Yeah, my Stradom was a brother of my grandmother. That's why I know a lot about the guy. I'm not a nepotist. I don't want to promote my own bloodline and family, but it's real truth. I'm also criticizing, but I think and I reckon he was wrong. And my grandfather on my mother's side was a brother-in-law of Stradom. And he was also into politics, not very prominent, but he was an organizer at the Verda branch of the NP, somewhere in the Cape. I'm not sure quite where.
Yeah.
And PW was an organizer in his organization. He was working under my grandfather. So my grandfather knew his ideologies and his viewpoints. So much later, yes, it's towards the end of the 70s when John Foster was going out, my grandmother and grandfather was always, every year, the opening of Parliament, they took the little Beetle Volkswagen and they went down to Cape Town, because my grandfather was very much into politics and into the welfare of his country. He had a lot of sentiment about it. He was very emotional about it as well. So one year he returned, just at the time when it was clear that PW would become Prime Minister and not Connie Mulder, who was supposed to follow up John Foster, but due to the information scandal, what was it, newspaper Citizen, I think, was involved with Eshel Rudy and all of that. You must remember that. And then my grandmother, when he arrived back home, because they were staying in our house for years, for decades actually, and he told my mother, he said, my daughter, PW is going to become the next prime minister. And the tears were flowing from his eyes, and he said, then it's the end of us. Because he knew what character PW Botha was. He knew that. He knew him as a person. I mean, he worked under him as an organizer in the NP. He knew exactly who he was. That's why also his brother-in-law, J.G. Strydom, never appointed PW, although he was as a minister, although he was a senior member of cabinet. He knew what he was and what his ideologies was. And he was I will say in Afrikaans, he was a twee gat jakkals.
But was he a member of the Broederbond?
Oh yes, they all were. Only Strydom were not. Only Strydom were not. That's why I'm singling him out as a real Boer leader amongst them all. They were all either Boers or Afrikaners. They were either Afrikaners or Afrikaner hybrids or Boers. And the only one who was a real Boer was Strydom.
Okay, now let's talk about what happened when PW Botha was basically kicked out by FW de Klerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, give us a background to that.
Yeah, well, PW was going too slow. Like, there's no doubt about it. People think today he was conservative and he wanted to stop it. No, it's not true. He was driving this agenda all the time. I know, because I started getting involved into politics when I was 9 years old. We stayed in Klerksdorp. I'm not sure if you know, but the town of Klerksdorp, very conservative and the old Western Transvaal. Now it's Northwest Province. And I was delivering pamphlets into the post boxes of people.
Right.
My mother was behind me with a little Volkswagen Beetle, and she was just, giving me more pamphlets as I ran out. Barefoot until 12 o'clock at night. And in those pamphlets, I can still remember what was written in there.
Yeah.
And we were opposing John Foster. We were simply telling the people, there was an election coming up. Don't vote for John Foster because he's going to give this country away to the blacks. So I was 9 years old, around roughly 71. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Realized as a child, I understood this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have been running up until 12 o'clock at night barefoot in the winter to do this. And all the way, we realized that all these MP members were driving this agenda. When PW followed up John Foster, I can still remember because I lived it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
I knew the talk of the day, and we all the newspapers. And then in 1969, the HNP, Herstigte Nasionale Partij, was founded by the son of General Herzog. He was Albert Herzog. He was a minister of post offices and hospitals. I'm not sure what the portfolio was exactly called. And he was also he was conservative, and he opposed the coming of TV. I'm not sure the television. I'm not sure. He didn't like the idea. And that's why we got TV that late, or only after, at about 1976, we got television in South Africa. So he was the one opposing. He was a conservative guy. And they had a newspaper, their mouthpiece, the Afrikaner. So they were also confused. They're supposed to be Boers because they were driving Boer principles, what they call themselves, the newspaper Afrikaner. Like Jaap Maree, I'm not sure if you're aware of Jaap Maree later on. He was a vice leader second in charge of the HNP.
Yeah.
So we belonged to that party, and because Strydom was also a conservative prime minister, he was like an icon for this HNP. So we were all in that line of ideologies and viewpoints, and we were so frustrated as from roughly 1969. All the way down, so it's more than 50 years for me, knowing what is going on, having this insight, and realizing these people who are supposed to be your leaders are not leaders, as the Bible warns us against, these misleaders. And PW was definitely no exception. He was driving that agenda. He accused the right wing, the HNP. It's only when there's something which happened in the party, he was slowing down things, and I'm not quite sure why, what changed him, but he was a double character. He wasn't following one idea. And at a certain stage, there must have been something influencing him to say no, but we should not release Mandela now. And this is the only reason why they kicked him out. Because, like I said, de Klerk was directly involved with this New World Order guys. I saw pictures of him with George Soros. There's no doubt about it. So they were paying him, they were forcing him, and now this PW Botha is a fly in the ointment. He's opposing. So, and he accused them even of poisoning him. So it was so serious for them to achieve that goal, or at least that was a huge goal and a significant benchmark to get Mandela released. Now PW is trying to stop. There was no way he would stop. And that's why they just took him out.
Wow. Now, just regarding the involvement of de Klerk with these globalists, I'm talking about Soros, Bill Gates, all these sort of people. Yeah. Give us a bit of background to how that all started. Because I think I've seen photos of de Klerk in also the Knights of the Malta gowns with people.
Well, the connection is simple and straightforward. They're all Freemasons. They were all Freemasons, and it's still Freemasons, really. That's what they called diabolic forces. You cannot pinpoint. We all know about Freemasons, Illuminati, more or less the same. We know where they are based. Every town of South Africa, you've got a Masonic center. They all control. They infiltrated all through the country, all through the world. And how we got involved, I don't know, but most probably because he was a Freemason. That's how they follow the route. And Freemason is very, very secret. You know that when they start, they don't know at all what's coming, and it's only on a certain level. There are 32 levels. Only at a certain level they realize that this is all the Luciferian forces. And they think it's all religious.
And the 33rd level, I think, is where the satanic side comes in.
Comes in 32nd level, I think. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, okay. Well,
but, I've read a lot of books and how they influence. They manipulate. I've read a story about an Italian guy. He worked in the government as a bookkeeper and all that. Poor guy worked himself up, and then he wanted his son got his diploma also in the same direction, in the same discipline, and he wanted a job for his son. And they said, no, we are too many. We don't think he would be allowed. But then they started, okay, but if you become a Freemason, this is the typical story. And if you become a Freemason, we will assist you. That's why you're getting jobs only if you're a Freemason part of them, because their tentacles are everywhere. They're in control of most of the organizations, especially the government. Private as well, because I encountered that. I was working for Anglo-American, and the gold division became Anglo Gold, and a specific flagship mine of South Africa. And I just got to a certain level. I was the fastest to get my manager certificate on that mine, flagship of Anglo. You should get me now. I mean, I was the quickest, so I was doing very well, and I did well in my production. At a certain stage, nothing happened for me anymore, and they started opposing me, accusing me of things. It's all false accusations.
Yeah,
I was very prominent, and I did very, very well because God is on my side. And all of a sudden, they just blocked everything, and I couldn't find out. I couldn't understand what's going on. My mentor was telling them, this guy's walking on water. What do you have against him? Look at, he's got proof of his production, his safety. That mine, which had about 18 fatalities a year, it was a very high productive mine. They called it the best mine in the world. Very dynamic. And myself, I was the only ship boss or mine. I was a ship boss and a mine captain while I was working there. I never had one fatality in 10 years.
Wow.
But they're all saying I was bad. And I blasted records, achieved records in the developing and the stoping. They just blocked me. And then after the interview, there was a couple of HR people, and they just nailed me. And I don't know why. What's going on? I thought I was a bright star. And then the other guy told me, don't worry about it. They're all Freemasons. This is an example from my own life.
Yeah. Now, look, I
know it. I've experienced it. I've gone through it. I know how they go about. So if you are part of them, you will go places. Like they said about him. I remember a picture. He was sitting. He was a golf player. They called him FW de Klerk, FW. His name is Frederik Willem de Klerk. I'm not sure it's Willem, but it's Frederik Frikkie. They called him, and he was sitting with a cigarette at the golf course, and the remark was, "Look at this man. He will go places." Yes, he did. And he messed up our country. He went places, which they preserved for him.
Now, look, I just want to cut across to a related area, and that is the Rothschild family have had a huge influence over politics in South Africa from way back when De Beers basically took over the big hole of Kimberley.
Exactly. Yeah.
When
they also played a role with Cecil Rhodes and all of that.
Cecil Rhodes and all that sort of stuff. They've actually got an office in Johannesburg, and their top guy used to be a finance minister in South Africa, and their tie-up with the South African Reserve Bank, with the entire banking system, with the Oppenheimers. I'd like you to just unpack what you know about this, because this is all tied up with the politics of what's happening in South Africa right now.
Yeah, well, even the Boer War was started due to correspondence between two of these Jewish. Sorry, I just want to close this on my computer.
Okay.
This Jewish capitalists, they were actually communicating each other. And
You're talking about Barney Benato?
Yeah, them as well, and others. They were actually initiating this war. It was their agenda. We know that they started focusing because you would notice that they didn't really bother with the Free State. They never, because the Free State, there was no mining at the time, and the part of the Free State which had minerals, the diamonds and Kimberley was part of the Free State.
Yeah.
So in a slight transaction of President David's
Graf, they called it. You heard about David's Graf? David's grave?
I'm not quite,
well, I'll tell you how that all came about. Was that there was a line drawn between the southern point of the Free State and then David's Graf, or David's grave. Which then showed the actual line between what was then Griqualand West, which the Griquas had settled, and the Free State. And Waterboer and the Cox and those guys,
Adam Kok.
Adam Kok, who was the third who came through and set up in East Griqualand much later. But what actually happened was when they found all these diamonds in Kimberley, the suggestion was made, because no one was sure whether Kimberley was in the Free State or whether it was actually in Griqualand West.
Yeah, but it was definitely not. It was definitely part of a Boer Republic.
Yeah, it was definitely part of the Free State. But the suggestion has been made that David's grave, or David's graf, was moved by some of these diamond speculators to another location, so that the whole line going north from that southernmost point would then bring Kimberley into Griqualand West, which would then take it out of the Free State.
So they would get it out of the Free
State. And
it's all about money. It's all about minerals.
Yeah.
But again, against what the Boers were after. They were just after a peaceful life, earning a living in an honest way.
Yeah.
It went back like we discussed during the first part. It all started with the British sending the missionaries, where the London Missionary Association was the most prominent, sending the missionaries under the smokescreen of bringing the message of God. But they were much more interested in the gold of Menno Motapa. So it's all about minerals for them and health.
Yeah.
All the time. Wealth, I mean. All about wealth. So when the diamonds were found there, it's the same thing. They manipulated. They paid a few pounds, really like £1,000 in those days, quite a lot in those days, but a very relative small amount. So just give that piece of land because the diamonds are there, and we know what role Mr. Rhodes played in all of that, having driving the agenda of the Rothschilds. And then the same happened. Like the rest of the Free State was all sheep farming. So we were not really interested in it. You know, they didn't invade the Free State after the Zand River Convention, but they attacked the Boers, during the second freedom, which ended at Mayuba. So they were always attacking the ZAR because there was wealth, there were minerals.
Yeah.
So it's the same agenda all over. And it's still about that because South Africa is still one of the richest countries in terms of minerals in the world. And the route, the strategic location of South Africa.
Oh, yeah. With Cape Town and Simonstown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, look,
that control is very vital for them in terms of that. And then they earmark the people who they pay. It's all about money in the pocket again. And most people has got no principles. That's why you look at the face like FW, you see every picture tells a story.
Yeah.
Look at the Victoria Face Conference Australia, and look at this guy. This picture portraying the face of a loser.
Yeah. Well, look, I want.
On his face.
I'm going to put two more questions to you. I'm going to wrap up this live stream. The first question is, was de Klerk a traitor to the people of South Africa? Not just the whites, but everybody in South Africa, because look what's happened to the entire country. Was he a traitor, and was he a coward?
Of course, he definitely was he a traitor because he took money. He took money to do something which was not good for the country. The outcome is outcome based.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think even the most liberal person would admit today that it's a mess. I mean, you can't be serious if you're still saying things are going well.
Yeah.
And there would be a good outcome. It's just spiraling down all the time. Because he was a friend to himself, he fought. At the end of the day, he was his own worst enemy as well. Because look at his face, he's a loser. All the money in the world can't bring you happiness. If you betray your people and you sell your soul. This is what FW de Klerk did. So he was an enemy, not only of the Boers, everybody in the country, because it's not going well with anyone in this country. For all people in South Africa, it's a nightmare. And that is the legacy. It is the legacy of FW and Mandela.
You know what I find extraordinary is that the people, that the ANC leadership were the terrorists who were based up in Zambia back in the 1980s and 1990s, and they were sitting there being paid by people like George Soros and the Open Society Foundation who wanted to bring down South Africa. Now, okay, we all know this to be a fact, but have you heard the suggestion that South Africa is... Oh, I've just lost you. You there, Hans?
No, I'm still here.
I've lost your camera.
Oh, God.
Just bring your camera back and we'll continue.
There
you go. That's it.
Incoming call. Incoming call. But
okay. Okay. Now, look, there's suggestions that South Africa is actually a registered company. It's not a democratic country.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's you can actually do a search on the SEC report on South Africa as a registered company. Yeah. And just to add to that, Washington D.C. has a piece which is kind of northwest of the capital, which is like this very, very upmarket part of Washington D.C., which apparently is a separate entity. It's not part of the United States of America. And in that little area are all the embassies, which are now registered companies. And South Africa is right in the middle of it.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of it. I've seen that. I'm totally aware of it. It just shows the agenda, the hidden agenda.
But what does that make people living in South Africa? Are they just like shares or assets of some company that's been run by the royal family?
assets. The only share we have is like we own some land here and there, but you know, with this new act, we're trying to destroy that right.
So the whole thing is deception.
Yeah, exactly. And we will just be slaves. Their ideal is to create anarchy in the country, which is, they are really achieving that. And they want the white people to, you know, they know the white people are good slaves, you know, I mean, if I can call it that, because the only countries in South Africa, in Africa, in fact, which were developed were white dominated, like Zimbabwe, the ex-South Africa, and in a way Mozambique as well, because they were governed by the Portuguese. Those were the only successful countries, so they know that where the whites are, there's prosperity. I've been to 20 African countries, and everywhere I went, they always like worshipping me, because they think if they see a white skin, they think there will be prosperity here, prosperity here. There will be wealth, and that's all they are really interested in is wealth. So they were not totally wiped out, the white people, because they know if there's only 50,000 left in Zimbabwe today. They're very much oppressed and have a low profile, but they stole the backbone. In South Africa, it's a different story, because we won't be able to totally oppress us like we did, what they are achieving in Zimbabwe, because they were just a couple of, let's say, loose Englishmen wandering around there. The Boers are a nation. It's not as easy as to destroy a nation, and just a group of, an arm of a country like England.
No, look,
a couple of people with an English background and no real culture, established nation like the Boers. It will be different, much more difficult not to crack.
Yeah. Now, Hans, I've got to ask you this question: as a Boer, as a man whose nation have been deceived for generations now by different political groups and by different entities like the Crown, the royal family, and well, I call them Satanists, King Charles III, and I don't believe that they are they're supposed to be the leaders of the Protestant church, and
but we will get to churches, in another discussion.
Yeah.
Where did the churches originate? There were assemblies mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yahweh sent out his disciples and said, "Go out and make disciples of all nations."
Yeah. Now, look, I don't want to drag us out, and we'll do that in a separate live stream. But let's.
It's a very, very important discussion, because it's all woven into the whole global picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's happening right now is that the world is in a spiritual war. There's no question about that. Yeah. And you look at this bringing out of central bank digital currencies, and the World Health Organization saying that you're going to have a digital wallet, which will be your passport, and it'll be your.
It's all heading towards Revelations 13. You will not be able to buy or sell. Yeah. It's all heading there. I recognize this since the early 80s when they started with a bar chart. That's not the real mark of a beast, but it's a forerunner. And if you see the three long stripes, it's 666, it's the international banking code.
Well, if you think of Nostradamus, who was that great prophesier of where the world was going, he's got nothing on the Bible. You look at Revelations 13, where I remember at boarding school back in the 1960s, where we used to have to go to Sunday service every Sunday, and we had a sermon we had to listen to. And when I say we had to, it was just, it was compulsory. And there was one sermon that the pastor at Michael House gave, and that was about the mark of the beast. This is only 60 years ago. And he said, we cannot understand what the mark of the beast is going to be, because back then the technology hadn't got to the stage it is today, where we now we're talking about a chip in the hand. And
they didn't have Wi-Fi and internet and the computer systems.
It's incredible how prophetic everything in the Book of Revelations is.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it tells you directly you won't be able to buy or sell. Now, early 80s, bar chart. we're getting cards. Cash is going out, and there's now
Yeah.
Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. It's so clear. You should be totally blind if you don't see where it's going.
You certainly do have to be. Look, Hans, I'm going to wrap up this live stream now because I think we've covered not just Straight On and de Klerk, but we've covered a few other things as well, which are relevant. Yeah. And I think the important issue here is how, in the background, rather like a dark shadow, a sinister figure hiding behind the door, has always been the very ultra wealthy, the Rothschilds and the, these families like the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts who have basically been funded by the Rothschilds. They're like little satellites of the Rothschild family, aren't they?
Of course, definitely. I just want to point out one thing before we wrap it up.
Yeah.
Which also people didn't realize. They played on our emotions with human rights. They are not allowed to go to the same toilet, small, like we call petty apartheid. We have discussed it before.
Yeah.
And this is so rude and so cruel. But yeah, they don't even mind putting a tie around a person's neck and setting, well, even give him a bottle of petrol to soak himself and then set himself alight. That is fine. But if we prohibit, it's not that they never had toilets, they just have to go on the other side of a garage. In previous days, before these nice ultra cities and big garages, there was a toilet on that side and a toilet on that side. The one was always dirty and the one was always clean. That's how we notice why there was differences.
Yeah.
And but that was very rude. They were not allowed to vote in South Africa, but they were allowed to vote into their own homelands, which they refused to develop because then, if that was a success, they couldn't have looked at with greedy eyes to white South Africa.
Yeah.
Just to get this into perspective, if it was really about human rights and to get this poor underdogs out of a box and get them also to have all the privileges and so forth. If it was really about that, I would have agreed. It was because during my time living during apartheid, I also noticed things which I didn't feel was right.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand it all. But now, have you ever think about why didn't they created like a confederate of states like the US?
That's what they should have done.
All these additional leaders were a part of it. South Africa might have taken the lead because we were most developed, economically strong. Now, they wiped all of those, like we want Gopes and Gacha, Buthelezi, the one from the Transkei, Oupa, Olomisa. There's an Oupa Khoza and a Olomisa. They were fairly good compared to these terrorists.
Well, the mafia.
They wiped them all from the mafia. They wiped them all from the plate, and they allowed these guys, these murderous terrorists. Mandela was actually convicted for more than 250 counts of acts of terrorism. He was guilty. He should have gone to gallows.
But then you had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Exactly. But if it wasn't for an Afrikaner, Justice Quartus de Wet, who showed mercy to him, he should have, in every country in those days, he should have gone to the gallows.
Yeah.
For conduct and what he was accused of and what he was found guilty of.
Yeah.
But now, the poor guy, he sat in jail for 17 years. He should have appreciated the fact that he wasn't sentenced to death.
Yeah.
You understand? Now they wipe all these traditional leaders, which could have done a very good job in this confederation of state, and they brought in these convicted terrorists. That should have told every clear-thinking person that something is seriously wrong here. Because they had a hidden agenda just to get these puppets of these, like we said, evil order.
Can we agree? Can we agree that the whole history of South Africa has been about the rape and pillage of gold and other substantial minerals out of the country by very, very wealthy entities, and they don't care one iota about human rights or anything else. That's just a complete charade.
That's all over the world. Why did the Korean Wars take place? Vietnam. It was a hidden agenda. It was mainly And this Ukraine is the same. It's all the same tactics. Ukraine and Russia.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm on the side of Putin, just for the record, because
Okay,
I think
but
Putin's the only guy who's really pushing Christian values and rejecting the LGBTQ agenda.
It's a very interesting point, but we should be very aware. We're living in the era of disinformation. Let's look at Putin. Let's look at Trump. In the 80s, I got aware of Trump, and to me, he was the most liberal, evil guy I've ever heard about. He was rich, thinking rich. He was liberal, and not long ago, all of a sudden he's the savior of a conservative people. Doesn't make sense. Putin. I've got a picture where he trained terrorists with Mnangagwa. He's worse than Mugabe.
Oh, really?
So Mnangagwa, I was there. No, he came all the way from the Lancaster Agreement with England. He was with Mugabe all the time. He was a very quiet guy. But I worked in Zimbabwe for 2 years. He's just as evil. He's just quiet.
You know that Putin is a young global leader at the World Economic Forum.
Exactly.
So is Zelensky. So is Zelensky.
So all of them.
And so is Ramaphosa.
A wise Indian once said that the left wing and the right wing belong to the same bird. They're all in the same boat. They're just playing a game to make us think that they're opposing. Look at the Cold War. There was no fire. There was no shot. No attack between Russia and America.
Yeah.
All those times people believed. And in the meantime, we were sending each other presents and whiskey and chocolates. I've got proof of that. Well, not proof. I've read that.
Yeah.
Now Putin, he was training terrorists against our young boys, white boys, with Mnangagwa and Samora Machel. I've got a picture. You can see all of them. He's a left-wing Russian KGB communist, and he's. When we discuss the churches, we will get to that. I don't belong to the church. I'm not a Christian. I'm a child of God, and I belong to the body of Christ, the Corpus Christi. Satan got alternatives. They call it the devil's alternative. He brings in politics and churches to make people think they are where they are supposed to be. Well, we're totally in the wrong place. But that is a very interesting topic we can discuss in future. So we are being misled.
Yeah.
We are being misled and think Putin is the guy. The other guy told me he thinks he's the rider of a white horse. I said, yeah, maybe the rider of Revolution. Not one of them.
But let's face it. Let's face it, that he's better than Zelensky.
I can agree on that totally.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's good.
No, I get what you're saying, mate. Look, I'm going to wrap this.
Because also Biden. Biden is a pedophile. I mean, it's the worst embarrassment America had. But they voted for him. They preferred that guy, and the guy from Ukraine the same. But two bad things that doesn't make a good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Hans
is still wrong. I'm telling you that. That's my belief.
Yeah, Hans, we'll be putting this pre-recording up on Monday night at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, and thank you so much for joining me on a Sunday morning to get this out. I know that load shedding is a huge issue for you guys, and I will send you the link on Loving Life TV once we've actually moved it from YouTube. It'll be initially on YouTube. You can watch it at 8 p.m. All you have to do is go to Loving Life homepage and look at the video, because on Monday I'll put up the link to this live stream, so you'll be able to watch it if you've got electricity. Well, it's just been played out. All right, mate. Take care and have a great evening.
Same to you, and sorry for bothering you on a Sunday because we had an arrangement.
That's not a problem. We've got it all together. We've covered the subject. And I look forward to our next one. Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Tot ziens. Okay, guys, that was my discussion with Hans. Let me just shut this down. There we go. Now, just quickly reminding you, tomorrow night I'm speaking to Dr. Peter McCulloch, that famous doctor in the USA who's been spearheading the campaign against the COVID situation. I'm going to leave it at that, just so that I don't have to take this video off YouTube. Censorship City. But we're going to be talking to Dr. Peter McCulloch tomorrow night at 8 p.m. and our subject is the damage being done to young people who try and change their gender. And we're talking about puberty blockers, we're talking about surgeries, we're talking about really shit stuff that is going on, all under the title of political correctness, or woke, the woke agenda. And on Wednesday night, I've got a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Patrick Fisher, who has been basically defamed in social media at the moment. This man has done so much for charity in South Africa, and there's this grub who's trying to destroy his work. I mean, his legacy is amazing, and we will be talking about his legacy on Wednesday night. This is Patrick's, and Patrick will be responding directly to all these nefarious allegations being made by, in particular, someone hiding behind the name of Web of Deceit. And I'm very proud to be there on Patrick's side. He is a loving life hero. I've covered many of his projects where he's delivered tons of food to poor white squatters in Gauteng. He also delivers a huge amount of hay to farmers who are in drought-stricken areas. This guy is quite extraordinary, and to target him and try and defame him publicly is just unacceptable. And Loving Life will not let it happen. All right, having said that, a bit of a rant, I'm going to now go out with Hier bly ek boer. And I think that's a very relevant subject. This is a song by Winston Coetzee, a good part of, or good friend of the Loving Life family. Here we go.
Meer as 61,000 van ons voorvaders het op die grens vir ons gesterwe, sodat ons vry kan wees. Die is my land, die is my reg, hier is ek boer. Van stof is ek gemaak en sal ek terugkeer. Die Bybel is die woord waaruit ek leer, soos die grond op die aarde. Hier bly ek boer. Soos 'n diep in die nag sal die vyand kom, maar hier bly ek staan en ek draai nie om, want jy maak my nie bang nie. Hier bly ek boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek boer. Soos 'n bladam in die somer wat vreugde bring. My oupa wat maniekie kon sing, soos hy stap deur die lande. Hier was hy boer. My wortels lê diep in die grond geplant. My seun soos my pa los ek vir jou die land, en jy hoef nie te vrees nie. Hier sal jy boer. My land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef.
kom, die ljus sal 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 kom.